in true theme of this summer school, I'm really happy to present to you the two speakers for today's lecture that will be about interdisciplinary working. And I'm really happy to present these two speakers because they are the true form of interdisciplinarity within our institute. And I hope that you'll be able to understand how interdisciplinarity can work from their own personal experience and their great knowledge in this topic. So first off, we have Natalie Uomini, that is trained in cognitive science, linguistics, archaeology, and anthropology. She researches cognitive evolution with a focus on the origins of language, teaching, and tool-making skills in the animal kingdom. She integrates approaches from biology, anthropology, neuroscience, psychology, and archaeology to explore the cognitive basis of tool-making abilities in humans, birds, and sea otters. She also uses behavioral observations, field experiments, and laboratory experiments. She mostly works with humans and wild animals, both young and adult, and she enjoys collaborating with a wide range of disciplines that intersect with her topics. And then second, of course, we have Eleftheria Orfanou. She currently is a PhD student at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History within the Department of Archaeology and the Department of Archaeogenetics. Her research uses multiple lines of evidence, namely ancient DNA analysis, stable isotope analysis, osteoarchaeology, and material culture analysis to explore the genomic signature, biological kinship, and patterns of individual diet and mobility of the individuals of late Bronze Age sites in central Germany. The overarching aim of her research is to reconstruct both the life histories and the bioarchaeology profiles of these individuals and shed light on the social structures of late Bronze Age community. So of course, as you can understand from their biographies, they're the best people to present this work, and I hope you'll be able to have a really good understanding of why we created the summer school and tie everything up together. And I hope this will bring up your interest to collaborate both with each other and with people from all sorts of fields. And please, Eleftheria and Natalie, teach us more and make us even more interested about the summer school. And please go ahead.
Thank you, Jacopo, and hello everyone, and welcome to our interdisciplinary working talk. As Jacopo said, we are Eleftheria and Natalie, and today we're going to give you an overview of how to work interdisciplinary. So we will talk about what it is, interdisciplinarity, when do we need it, how to do it by mentioning what promotes interdisciplinarity, but also what impedes it. We will also offer some recommendations for someone doing or thinking of doing interdisciplinary research. And in the end, we have a very small task for you. So there are many words to describe the type of research where multiple disciplines are involved. So for example, I'm sure you have heard the words multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, and usually these words go hand in hand with the words such as integration between disciplines or bridging disciplines. However, these terms are often poorly defined, confusing, and sometimes they are used interchangeably. And the truth is that they are describing different concepts, which I will try to explain. So let's start from the basics. So I will try, what is a discipline? And I think that everyone knows what a discipline is, but if we check dictionaries, a discipline is defined as a branch of knowledge and instruction, learning, teaching, or education, but also as a field of study or as an activity. And examples of that include for economics, chemistry, history, anthropology, and so on. But let's see now what all these fancy words mean. So first, we have intradisciplinary. So basically, intra means within, on the inside, and basically it means working within a single discipline. So we don't have any integration of other disciplines or interaction. Then we have multidisciplinary research, and multi means many, and basically draws on knowledge from different disciplines, but stays within the boundaries of those fields. Or in other words, it refers to when people from different disciplines are working together, each drawing on their own disciplinary knowledge. cross-disciplinary research, and cross means intersecting. It happens when intersecting knowledge from two or more disciplines, or viewing one discipline from the perspective of another. So basically, researchers collaborate with the goal of transferring knowledge from one discipline to another. And then we have interdisciplinary research, which is the focus of this lecture. And inter means among, between. And basically, it analyzes, synthesizes, and harmonizes links between disciplines into a coordinated and a coherent whole. Or we can also say that it integrates knowledge and methods from different disciplines using a real synthesis of approaches. And then we have the most recent term, which is transdisciplinary research. And trans means across or beyond. And basically, it integrates the natural, social, and health sciences in a humanities context, and in so doing, transcends each of their traditional boundaries. So basically, it creates a unity of intellectual frameworks beyond the disciplinary perspectives. We can also talk, in order to understand a little bit better what they mean, we can talk about levels, degree of integration. So for example, in multidisciplinary approaches, we don't have real integration. The disciplines remain separate. And then in interdisciplinary research, they are integrated. And in transdisciplinary research, they have become one. Also, they have different goals. So in multidisciplinary research, it contributes to a specific project. In interdisciplinary research, it is all about learning and creating new ideas through interaction and integration. And transdisciplinary research is problem-oriented. So basically, these terms can be used to describe multiple disciplinary approaches, so multiple disciplinary, to varying degrees on the same continuum. So another good example, again, to describe what multi, inter, and transdisciplinary means comes from an article from Choi and Park in 2006. And I think they describe it very well, because they say multidisciplinary research is like a salad bowl that you can really distinguish the ingredients in there. And interdisciplinary research is like a melting pot, that it can be a soup or a stew, that the ingredients are only partially recognizable. And then you have transdisciplinary research, which is like a cake where the ingredients are no longer distinguishable and the final product is of a different kind. So now that we have some definition of these terms, let's see, why do we need to bridge disciplines? So let's start by using the parable of the 6 blind men and the elephant. So there are various versions of these, and people are using it for explaining different concepts. But basically, it's a group of blind people that they are touching an elephant in the hope of learning what it is, because they heard what an elephant is, but they don't, as a creature, but they don't know what it is. So, and each person feels a different part, but only one part. So let's say the tail or the ear. And then they are trying to describe the elephant, but based on their limited experience. And they realize that they are in complete disagreement, because however, each person believes that they know the truth, what is an elephant. However, this is not surprising that they cannot agree, because they're not exchanging knowledge, they're not communicating. However, there are other versions of that they stop talking and they start listening and they start collaborating to see what an elephant is. So I think in our case, as you might have guessed, the elephant could easily represent a problem, a known problem that needs solving. And then we have the scientists that they're trying to solve it, but without communicating and based on their limited expertise. However, if they did collaborate and communicate, the chances of solving the problem would be way higher. So here we collected some quotes from the Nature special issue on interdisciplinarity that you should definitely read. And basically, so why do we need interdisciplinarity? What do they say? So an interdisciplinary approach should drive people to ask questions and solve problems that have never come up before, or It can also address old problems, especially those that have proved unwilling to yield to conventional approaches. Also, for complex modern problems, they do require many types of expertise across disciplines, and if I may add, also past complex problems. And in many endeavors, success requires collaborative, cooperative work towards a goal that is beyond the capability of any one individual. And sometimes actually too much top talent can harm the result. So now Natalie is going to talk about levels of interdisciplinarity.
Okay, so and these are actually, I think I see 3 levels that you need to pass through on your progress, on your journey to through interdisciplinary. And the sort of the first level is where you know and cite the work from other disciplines. And this is like a one-way thing. So, you know, I'm sure you all do this. Most people do this. So in fact, you can consider that you're already set up for working interdisciplinary when you're aware of other disciplines and you can appropriately cite them. The next slide, please.
Just sorry, because yeah.
Thank you. So the next stage, I would say, is once you can understand and cite the other disciplines, you're then able to use the tools and methods from those disciplines in your own work. And so, for example, when people first applied geometric morphometrics to measure the shape of fossil skulls, this was a radically different method to the previously established method. So this is still, in fact, a one-way process where you're taking something from another discipline and bringing it to your own. Next slide, please. And finally, the sort of third stage that I see is when you then start to exchange with another discipline. So then it becomes a real two-way process. And this is what I call a bridge. So you really here are giving and taking in a two-way collaboration where both sides actually benefit from the input of the other. This is actually pretty hard to do, and that's what we're going to talk about in the rest of the presentation. Next slide, please. So we'd like to do a flash survey now and to learn a little bit about you. So have you ever worked interdisciplinary before, or have you ever been involved in such a project? So please use the raise hands function in Zoom so we can just see the numbers. We have 9, 10. Okay.
Quite a lot, eh?
I think it's in the reactions, isn't it? The raising hand function. I never know where it is. They keep moving it. Oh, 14. Okay. Yeah. 15. Probably like most everyone in the room, I suspect. So that's fantastic. And so, yeah, essentially, we want to give you some sort of insights that we've gained from our own experience. So if we go to the next slide, I'd like to share with you something about myself and where I'm coming from and some of the things I've learned. So if maybe you could just slowly click through the animations. Yeah, so I studied cognitive science and linguistics. And I essentially very early on, even in my bachelor's, I was interested in this overlap section between disciplines. And then I moved for my PhD, moved up to shifting to another discipline. And then as a postdoc, I shifted again to new disciplines. And then in fact, the topics that I work on are sort of at the center of all of these. And I really integrate everything that I've learned, because I haven't just moved from one to the other, but that's great, thanks. Really looking at the crossover and these gray areas in between the disciplines, which to me are the most exciting. And the next slide, please. So these are some of the kinds of examples of disciplines that I've been pioneering and combining that normally don't speak to each other. But in fact, it is quite rewarding because I've been able to publish this work in some pretty high profile journals. So although it is a challenge, as we'll talk about later on, there are some high rewards. And I see really that these gray areas in between the disciplines are the ones where the future, I think, will be able to get the most exciting things in the future. Of course, it's not for everyone. So on the next slide, I'll show you sort of what I've learned from all of this. One of the biggest lessons is that you start out with conflict with your collaborator or with your other discipline, and then you have to come to a compromise. And this slide is really showing that each discipline has their own point of view. And so you need to really come to this middle ground where you can start to understand each other. And on the next slide, I'll show you how I've been trying to combine these two fields, like archaeology and psychology. Now, as an archaeologist, you often work in the mud, in the rain, and this is really not compatible at all with the kind of lab work that is done in experimental psychology. And next slide, please. So in the end, what happened on this project is that we had several points of conflict that we had to go through before we could reach a good compromise. So even in the project planning, we had to discuss what are considered valid data in the first place, like numbers of subjects and the qualitative versus quantitative data collection methods. And we also had a lot of tension between the trying to keep a naturalistic environment and trying to keep good control of the variables. And so each discipline has its own real standards. And in the end, we had to both compromise. So neither of us were quite happy, but we ended up with something that was totally new and exciting in its own way. And then when we came to the publication, we had to again start to think about the theoretical framing of our study. Like, how do you explain the motivations and the importance of your results so that they're attractive to both of the disciplines involved? And this is a problem because the big open questions are actually different in each field. So it's also then we had a lot of thinking to do about where and how to publish. And that's also not an easy thing to do. So these are sort of like some of the experiences that I've had. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges and the ways to overcome those. Next slide, please.
So now it's my turn again. So what about my personal experience with interdisciplinarity? So I started working interdisciplinary 2 years ago when I started my PhD. So as Jacobo said, probably he mentioned, my bachelor's degree is in archaeology, my master's is in human osteoarchaeology, and I'm a second year PhD student at the Department of Archaeogenetics and Archaeology at the Max Planck. So the project that I'm working on, it is interdisciplinary in the sense that we are people from many different disciplines working together towards a common goal and generating new ideas, but also in the sense that I'm not just contributing my osteoarchaeological knowledge, but I'm actually getting trained in archaeogenetics and isotopes, which is something completely new to me, with the overarching aim to synthesize these lines of evidence and provide a more complete picture of the past. And these are some of the things that all these disciplines helped me decipher during my PhD. So, as an archaeologist, I participated a lot in a lot of excavations. So I know how to excavate, report, and analyze skeletons of individuals. But when I started with ancient DNA, it felt that I was entering a whole new different world. And so I had never done, for example, lab work before. And it took me forever to learn how to wear all these clothes that you saw also from other lectures before, and also how to hold a pipette, for example. But it was super exciting to learn all of these things, and it is still super exciting because it lets me access all this new knowledge and also participate in the whole process from digging up the bones of individuals to the extraction of their DNA and the analysis after. So basically, this helps me understand the context of my research even better, and it makes me feel more connected with my research. However, all this excitement does not come without these challenges, which, believe me, are a lot. So now, let's see, what do you think? Because many people, as we saw, have worked or are working interdisciplinary. So we would like you to type in the chat, what do you think are the main challenges of interdisciplinary research? And of course, we will continue and explain, give an overview of the main ones. So let's see. Okay, so far we see to communicate, which is, we will see, very important. Terminology, understand the mindset of other disciplines, specific jargon, the fact that all participants of the project are equally open-minded, time frame, agreeing on the methodology. Yeah, I think all of them are challenges that you encounter in interdisciplinary research.
Yeah, great.
Yes.
Yeah,
perfect.
I think excellent. I mean, I think everything that's been put in the chat here is completely in line with what we also think. So we pulled out just a few of the challenges that we think are especially the biggest hurdles here to people starting interdisciplinary research or even succeeding in it. Yeah, let's just go to the next slide. So I'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. So the first one is arrogance. And in fact, it's usually not conscious. It's usually really not intended. But the fact is that when we are trained in a discipline, we are taught that that's how things are done. And we're taught that this is the way you do your research. And we're not taught how other disciplines work. And so we simply come through our education with a blinded view. And this is not, it's not our fault. It's not the fault of anybody. In fact, it's just how the education system works. So what it's important to remember that each discipline really has its own established methods and standards for conducting research. And these have really been validated and accepted by that community. In particular, I want to mention the difference between empirical experimental disciplines, like most of the hard sciences, and the social and conceptual approaches in most of the social science and humanities. And this paper here is exactly talking about how you can combine neuroscience and archaeology, which are really completely at odds in this sense. And so one of the sort of biggest complaints I have when I see people who try to start collaborating is that they just accuse the other discipline of being unscientific or being, I don't know, not proper, not correct. And in fact, this just stems from this arrogance that is really built into us. And so we have to overcome that ourselves by educating ourselves and being more open-minded. Next slide, please. So some of you wrote about terminology in the chat. This is very important. Next slide, please. So it's super important to be clear about your terms, and you might not really even realize in the beginning which terms your other collaborator doesn't know about. So really discuss your terminology all the time, before, during, and after your study. Discuss it at coffee break, in the lunchroom, over dinner. Wait, can we go back just
yes,
one? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
So really just talk about, be clear on your terms all the time. Ask your collaborator if you're not clear. Does anybody here know what these 4 pictures are showing by any chance? You can type it in the chat. Yeah.
Someone says cortex.
Right. It's an example of the word cortex and how that has 4 different meanings depending on the discipline. So really, like, it's super important to clarify some other words that I've come across in my own research that also have other meanings in different disciplines. Context, that's not the same in archaeology and in animal behavior. Evolution also has different meanings. The word model. So like all of these things really, like when you're using this word in your own discipline, you have to be careful that the other discipline will understand it the same way. So one of the examples I have is when I combined linguistics and primatology, and we were talking about chimpanzee behavior, and we would talk about the word context. So in animal behavior, the context is actually the situation in which the animal finds itself. And in linguistic, the context is really the sounds that are around the sound that you're in phonetics, for example, it's the sounds that you're talking about. So then in this particular collaboration, we decided not to use the word context at all. Instead, we wrote situation when we're talking about the chimpanzee, and then we just use something else for the phonetics terms. So we're avoiding terms that we know would be problematic. So the terminology really, it not only helps you to communicate with outside your discipline, but it will also help you within your own discipline. So when you're using a lot of heavy jargon, you've probably experienced this yourself, that you're falling asleep in a conference because you can't understand. So the goal is to move from this scenario to the next scenario, which is that you use simple language, clear language, and that even the experts in your own discipline can really understand clearly and they get excited about your work. So one of the other challenges is that you feel that you have a lack of knowledge. This is normal. You don't know what are the major debates. You don't know the big questions in the other field. You don't know even what is known and what is not known, what's relevant to the field and the history of the field research. So these really seems like a lot of stuff to deal with. And one of the ways that I started to get through all of that during my PhD, when I was interested in primatology, I just went to conferences. I signed up for like literally, there was like these annual conferences in the UK for the PSGB. I became a member. I went to their meetings. It was super nice. I never presented anything because I wasn't working. I was doing archaeology for my PhD, but I listened to the conferences, and in a day or two, you can just get a quick overview. What are the current topics in that field? You get to listen to the discussions and hear the debates people are having. And I found that actually, instead of trying to read publications, to me, that was the most effective and quickest way to really get into the discipline and to stay current with it. So another challenge that a lot of people are aware of is the time commitment you need to work interdisciplinary. And the only thing we want to say here is that it's necessary. There's really no way around it. So that's all. You just have to accept that. So the ideas about what is proper really depend again on this upbringing that we've had in our own disciplines, and they really vary. So for example, the way that we present a talk, well, in linguistics, you have a handout and you read this from the paper. In archaeology, you present slides and you talk to the slides. In biology, for example, you'll start with a hypothesis. And in anthropology, you'll start by presenting data. And all of these sort of structural differences, they're like codes that each discipline has. But it's good to be aware of those when you're presenting. If you're presenting work in a conference of that discipline, you need to sort of make sure that you fit their format. Otherwise, they'll really think you're a bit of a weirdo. And then the other kind of ideas of what's proper can affect also the publication types. Some disciplines really rely on books, others rely on journal articles or even video recordings. And so what we need to really keep in mind here is that there's no one idea of what is proper. Like it really depends on the discipline, but you cannot apply that idea to the other discipline that you don't know. So just stay open-minded here with what you think is proper. So one of the also big challenges that we've seen is scale differences. So for example, some disciplines work on millions of years and others work on milliseconds. This is like paleoanthropology and neuroscience, for example. But there are also time scales in how you do the research. And I think somebody wrote that in the chat earlier. In archaeology, it's perfectly normal to do a single project for several years. Whereas in psychology, in experimental psychology, a project can be designed and completed within 3 months. So this also can create tension between the partners if these expectations are not clearly outlined. And I learned this the hard way when I started my collaboration as an archaeologist with a psychologist. And he really was shocked after 1 year when we hadn't advanced very much. he said he should have finished the project by now. And I said, we're just starting. And this is when we both realized that there's a great difference here. And so now I make sure when I start with a new collaborator, I always make sure that I explain this to them and decide what their expectations really will be. And then also how you work and publish can differ. So whether you work as a single author or in teams, this also it can be a challenge sometimes. So finally, this fear of the unknown, this is quite normal. I think really there's nothing you can really do about this. It depends on your personality, and it can be quite daunting, but we want to stress that interdisciplinary working is actually not for everyone. And it's not obligatory. It doesn't have to be done. And so if you want to do this kind of work, then you can overcome your fear of the unknown, and that's not a problem. Next, we'll show a few more of the challenges that were raised by this special issue here. It's like, especially that we see as right now is happening as a trend, is that people use this term as a fashionable label, but actually doing it is a lot harder than sticking a label on. So really, this takes good communication skills, and you also have to be navigate the power relationships between disciplines. So like, for example, I'm working now with AI, and is quite a very elite discipline at the moment. And it can sometimes be hard to make yourself heard when a discipline is so dominant. And as someone else in the chat mentioned also, that it's hard to publish papers in top tier journals. So these are some of the challenges. And then there's, I think, one more slide about those other types of challenges. Do we have one more slide? Yep.
Can I just add, I think it's very important, I don't know if you mentioned it, but the unequal power among disciplines. So in true interdisciplinary research, I think one discipline shouldn't be valued higher than another one. And ideally, everyone should be equally valued and respected. And this way, we need genuine integration, which means collaboration between equals and not, just service work of certain discipline towards another discipline. And unfortunately, we see that some disciplines, they consider, themselves more prestigious, unfortunately.
Exactly. This is a very good point. Thank you. That I forgot to mention, but it's important, that if you're in the dominant discipline and you're working with one of those that you think is just going to serve you, don't do that. Treat them with respect. And the other way around, if you're just feeling like you're in a subordinate discipline, then you will just need to assert yourself and really come to this agreement. So it is really about doing this two-way street and not just a one-way process.
And we also have,
and also, so one of the challenge, like we said, that the interdisciplinary working is not always necessary. It's not always even good. So it really has to come from the question, the research question. And very often we see that people try to impose it when it's not needed, and this can actually make things worse. So you have to really consider whether you really need this and whether it's going to benefit you. One of the things that sort of is an institutional problem or a sort of structural problem is that there aren't really proper measures to evaluate the success of this kind of work. And there are also no guidelines for multiple authorship and how you sort of acknowledge the different partners. But these probably will start to come. And then there are also limitations imposed by the grant agencies. So, for example, I applied for a grant once, and it was all really about interdisciplinary working. It was in the title, it was in the description. And I was like, I thought, great. And then so I filled out the application form. And then it's like you had to choose which one discipline your project fits in, and you could only choose one box. So this is sort of an example of how they can use using the term, but not really following through with it. So all these sort of limitations, these will need to be overcome in the future.
Okay, so now we have some recommendations. And for that, we are using Knapp's et al. 2015 article that he's talking about actually cross-disciplinary collaboration, but I believe that it does apply, his points apply to interdisciplinary research as well. And these recommendations concern the person and the team. So for example, that the person can educate themselves in several disciplines, or the team can create links with experts in other disciplines. So one of their first recommendation, and something that we have to remind ourselves, is that we are entering a completely, for example, in my case, a completely new field of research. And although this can be overwhelming for sure, we shouldn't forget that it is, as researchers, we really like new things and learning new things. So it is an exciting experience. So we have to remind ourselves that no one expects us to know everything about the new field, because sometimes other people have a whole background, let's say in genetics, they're bachelors, masters, PhD. So of course we have to be realistic and understand that it's not that easy to get in-depth knowledge that fast. And for this, we have to ask stupid questions, what we think is a stupid question, because that's the only way that we will really learn and advance our knowledge. And I think this goes hand in hand with that we shouldn't pretend, that we know everything from the beginning, especially if we're afraid to ask the stupid questions, because this will be super overwhelming later on during the project. We already mentioned that we need to learn the new vocabulary and the key ideas of the new field, and of course discuss our work with scientists from complementary fields. So how can we educate ourselves? Natalie mentioned already that we need to attend, it's a very good idea to attend conferences outside our topic, because then you can grasp the basic ideas or what's in right now in the field, question everything you read, make connections, and by friends and connections, of course. Review papers help a lot, because again, they address the main questions in the field. And whenever we can, to attend lectures in the other fields, seminars and courses. Another one of their recommendations is to go to the wet lab. So it depends. So if you move from a more theoretical discipline to a more, let's say, from archaeology to genetics, theoretical archaeology, for example, it's a very good idea to go to the wet lab, because only then you can understand where your data sets come from. And this is very important, because you understand the process of data collection, the cost, the time frame, the inbuilt assumptions, which will be very important to know the inbuilt assumptions for your analysis later on. And also to understand the cost and time frame is important for your collaborators as well. So you can give them an overview of how long a project takes, so they won't be in the dark wondering, oh, they should have been done in a week, but it takes months. So it's very good to communicate with your collaborators. And also by understanding the process, you appreciate your lab colleagues, how long it takes for something to get done. I won't go too much into this here, but they also suggest that we have to learn the language, because different fields have different terminology. And I found this point, the third point, the build the technical vocabulary, a good point. I was also doing that from a very simple thing, like every article that I was reading, the unknown word, I was writing it down. And if I couldn't understand the concept, then I was going to people and asking, what do they really mean by that? So I think that's very important. And of course, to have a joint nomenclature with your collaborators so you can communicate, and that should be established early in the project. And as we mentioned already, different fields move at different speeds, and we have to accept that and have a lot of patience. And also, this is a good point, that it doesn't mean that because someone, as Natalie mentioned, that they don't deliver results right away, that it means that they're not working hard. It's just they are working in a different pace according to their discipline. And of course, communicate with your collaborators how long something takes, as we mentioned before during the wet lab section. They also say that we should know what to expect when it comes to the the fact that different fields have different reward models. And that means, for example, the life sciences differ from the theoretical sciences, and this is the publication speed, impact factor scales, they can differ immensely. How certain authors are ordered, does it go alphabetically, does it go by seniority? All these things have to be clarified when you're working interdisciplinary very early on. And what consists significant contribution in a manuscript? Is it providing data, analysis, writing a big part of the paper? So all these things differ. So we have to have a well-planned publication strategy early on. Also, in different fields, they mean different things by data. So it is important to have a standardized data format, and also to have an electronic format. Actually, this helps a lot. And I think this is kind of self-evident maybe now in our days, but you never know. Writing minutes during meetings, because you don't want to have misunderstandings later. Oh, we agreed on that, or we didn't, you said that. So it's very important to write minutes. And also that if you have experimental data, it's important to also do sanity checks, to double check the data. The thing that we mentioned before about service work, so assess the advantages and disadvantages of service work. And service work, it means that maybe you have other skills as well. For example, you know how to code very well. So then you can contribute in another aspect of the project. So let's build the database, or, scripts that everyone can use, which is very helpful and important, but it can also be risky on your time, because this might take a lot of time. And you should also know what you can expect in return before that. A very important point is to create good bonds, structural bonds, because interdisciplinary research needs scientific exchange. Without this, it does not. For that, we need regular meetings and workshops, co-teaching of courses. As we saw, for example, during this workshop, it was a lot of co-teaching of courses and people that work in different disciplines. Another example that I think I'm the living example of, so I'm a shared PhD student between archaeology and archaeogenetics. I have shared supervision. So for example, I have 4 supervisors. The publications will be shared. And I do get, there is constant knowledge exchange through meetings and meetings basically. And I get interdisciplinary training. But in all that, it's very important, their last point, that protect junior scientists from getting lost in cross-disciplinary collaboration or interdisciplinary, because it is very overwhelming sometimes, and people can get lost in multiple disciplines. And if you have to learn a lot of things and how to do certain things. So I think it is very important to be protected from this. And this can be from the supervisor, from the team, from in many ways. So as a team also, as a person, you have to realize that it's impossible to have all the skills, and we have to accept that at one point we will need an expert. And we can find experts by attending conferences, contacting random names at the university, join journal clubs. That also helps a lot. And for example, at the Max Planck, we do have joint journal clubs, and share your work often. But even if you follow all of these recommendations, because we are dealing with multiple disciplines, different disciplines sometimes, and with people, I think that's very important. Sometimes things are not working well, and then it's a matter of how we can solve this. One approach, according to Knapp et al., is to pretend that nothing has happened, which is not advisable, because that will create problems later. You can pause the collaboration if it's a matter of one individual in the collaboration. We can be understanding and pause the collaboration for a little bit. Search for alternatives if you have to, and in the end, you can always end the collaboration if you see. It sounds easier than the reality, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And they end the recommendations by saying be synergistic. So basically learn to share, be cooperative, combine contributions from every side, focus on the mutual gain and the mutual vision and goal, give always enough credit to partners and colleagues, acknowledge them. And I think it's important to really care for the interests of all parties as if they were on your own, as they mentioned, because then you can really do interdisciplinary research if you have a common goal. And of course, okay, these were the recommendations, but you also as a person and as a team, we need certain qualities in order to make it work. And I really think Rylands, again, from the Nature Interdisciplinary journal, issue actually, they said that interdisciplinary work requires particular skills, mindsets, and attention to establishing common ground. Someone mentioned mindsets before, which is very important. But also I found this interesting, that brilliance and wit are not enough for interdisciplinary progress. So some of the qualities that, of course, we can guess is to be understanding and respectful to your team, to the other disciplines, to everyone basically, to have a commitment to common interests, exceptional patience, because we said the things maybe are not working well, results taking longer, publications, and of course in the end you will need sometimes to compromise everyone. Again, we mentioned don't be afraid to ask stupid questions, because they're not stupid, that's how you learn. And we have to also accept that we still need deep experts in topics, because no man is an island, so we cannot do everything ourselves, and expect the unexpected, because things can happen. And some other things that also are team related is a good selection of team members, because this can make or break the team, or if you have the wrong disciplines, as we said before, it can also, you know, redirect the whole project, and we don't want that. Good team leaders, that they can offer guidance, they are familiar with the other disciplines, they have good ideas and vision. Maturity and flexibility of team members, so maturity in our discipline, but also as people, I think, and flexibility that we can accept other disciplines, of course, and be flexible and work with methods, different methods and things. Personal commitment, because we need a lot of time, because interdisciplinary research takes more time, more resources, more time to establish meaningful relationships. Incentives, and although the main incentive might be that, oh, we are discovering, we are solving a problem that is of interest to us, maybe we need also more incentives now and then. Institutional support and changes, because without institutional support, if you don't have an institution that supports disciplinary research, then it cannot really work out. As we said, common goal and shared vision. Communication is key, because without communication, we cannot even talk about interdisciplinary research, or transdisciplinary, for example. And constructive comments, because people need feedback, and that can be from your colleagues, from other people from other disciplines, from your supervisor. But if it's constructive, it helps us move ahead, actually. And I also think it's important to, for a successful interdisciplinary project, to understand what meaningful exchange is. And so according to Socrates and Plato, that are ancient Greek philosophers, there are two types of interaction between thinkers. And here we can see how Stenberg described them in her article, Advancing the Social Sciences Through the Interdisciplinary Enterprise. So basically, dialectic exchange occurs when the participants have subordinated the demands of their egos and have a paramount desire for discerning what is meaningful and true in what the other says, if meaning and truth exist there and can be coaxed out. On the other hand, the heuristic type of exchange includes the consuming desire to be persuasive to one's own view, philosophy, theory, or method, to overwhelm the other, and to secure what must appear at the time to be a victory of wits and argumentative skill. And of course, I think it's clear what kind of exchange works with interdisciplinary research. And I think I would say it's a dialectic exchange, because sometimes we do have to subordinate our own egos in order to work as a team. But you would be surprised, and I mean, I'm only working 2 years interdisciplinary, maybe Natalie has more to say about that, but you also see the heuristic type of exchange, that you see people that really think that they are better than you as a discipline, as people, and instead of talking to you and with you, they just talk at you, and then it doesn't end up anywhere. And of course, there will be a point that you will feel that you don't know who you are anymore. So for example, me, I'm an archaeologist, I'm an archaeogeneticist, and this can be quite overwhelming. But in the reality, why do we have to be only one thing? And I think it's important, in my personal opinion, of course, to remind ourselves, as the philosopher Karl Popper said, that we are not students of some subject matter, but students of problems, and problems may cut right across the borders of any subject matter or discipline. And with that, we also have included some references that we used during the presentation. And now Natalie will explain to you the team challenge that we have.
Okay, so I'll explain the team challenge, and then before we start the team challenge, we can take a few questions, and then when we come back from the team challenge, we can have then a bigger discussion time. So you'll have 10 minutes. You will be put into groups of 5. You'll be randomly assigned. Your challenge is to prepare a list to share with the class. So just, on paper, and you'll explain it verbally when we come back from the breakout rooms. So the challenge is on the next slide.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So you're going to be a research team on an interdisciplinary project, and you can choose your own topic. Some examples here: how did the human gut microbiome adapt to population migrations? When and where did the Indo-European language family originate? Why did megafauna go extinct? Or any other topic of your choice. So you're just welcome to choose the topic. And so here, it's not a slide, so we're not going to share slides. We're just going to verbally share your results. Tell us then, what are your 3 disciplines? We're going to assign you to 3 disciplines randomly, and your chosen topic. Please think of 2 likely pitfalls that you should avoid in your project. And then think about 3 strategies you could successfully use to bridge, or to use to successfully bridge those 3 disciplines that we're going to give you. So we've really mixed them up. So the optional, if you go back, optional, if you feel like it, you can give examples of project, like specific examples of methods or activities, but we're really asking you just to think on a theoretical or philosophical level about the challenges, pitfalls, and strategies that you can use. So on the next slide, now we can, these are going to be the groups.